Are you playing to win or just running out the clock? In sports, the game clock drives every decision. It creates urgency, sharpens focus, and pushes players to perform their best. So what if you treated your life with that same sense of urgency? I've created an exercise to help you do just that. It's called Your Game Clock. Download Your Game Clock today at bill-burke.net/clock. It's free, it's simple yet transformative, and it could be the first step towards achieving peak performance in the areas of your life that matter the most. Remember, life is not a practice run. Every second counts, and your time is now. Welcome to another episode of the Fortitude Forum. I'm your host, Bill Burke, and I am really excited to welcome today's guest. He's the president of Granger Construction, a family company and a company doing massive things in the Midwest. Dennis, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Bill. Honored and excited to be here.
Yeah, so this should be fun. You and I have spent a little time together a few weeks back, and that was a lot of fun getting to know some of your people and some of the background of the tremendous company that you're continuing to help build. So I love having you on the show to talk about this very important topic of mental toughness, but we're going to expand out a little bit as well. But I wanted to start by just recognizing what you've been through in terms of your role with the company. You've led this big company through a lot of different changes, things like industry evolution or different economic cycles. And now it seems like even expansion, geographic expansion into other states and other areas. So can you think of a moment where there was really a high stakes or high pressure situation where you had to make some sort of elite decision? And then what did you lean on, or who did you lean on or call on in order to step up and make that big decision?
Okay. Yeah. I can think of 1,000, really. And it's funny, too, and you think back over the years, it's being out on a project, there's so many things that are going on. And those stakes seem extremely high in the moment. And that pressure of it's all on me, it's on my shoulders, that was evident from day one. And I take that as a good sign because to me, that's like the very definition of ownership, right? If you don't take ownership, then you don't feel that pressure. I might have taken it a little too extreme on certain days and bore more responsibility than I needed to. But every project has that moment. You go into a job and you think, I got a plan. I know the exact right sequence of how this stuff is going to come together. And then you get into it and reality hits and there's a permitting delay here. There's a design change there. There's a weather day. And all your plans starts to crumble before your eyes. And you're like trying to just piece it back together every day, right? Take this new piece of information into account. How do I still get done on time, manage the budget, manage the owner's expectations, keep everybody safe? And then there's that moment where it all clicks and you go, I know what I got to do today. And there's nobody else that can do it. And it's terrorizing and energizing at the same time. Okay, all right, here we go. And at the time, it seemed like everything. Looking back, it affected dozens of people. They were maybe tens of thousands of dollars issue or $100,000 issues. But I can think of one time in particular, getting into the corporate realm and asked to do things that I'd never done before, lead parts of the business that I wasn't entirely educated on. Back in 2015, they had asked me to lead the sales division. And I said, to be honest, I don't really know that much about sales. I spent most of my time in my career creating value in operations. And they said, that's okay. The team knows how to sell. They just need leadership. I said, all right, well, figured out. I did it in the pre-con area of the business. I did it in a couple other areas of the business. So I'll get this figured out. So I go through the motions. I'm running the meeting. I'm asking lots of opinions. I'm getting conflicting advice from all different directions. I thought, this will work itself out. It always does. We got a couple of months in and sales dried out. And I went through a whole month. We didn't make a single sale. That's not good, but it'll work itself out. So then second month in a row, no sales. Third month in a row, I'm losing sleep. I'm failing and I'm realizing everybody knows it. The whole team's failing. And I'm like, that's on me. So I just remember, all the chips on the table. If you don't have sales, you don't have revenue. If you don't have revenue, you don't have people. It was a terrifying moment for me. I just was reading tons and tons of books because I wasn't sleeping, right? And I had this revelation, and I'll never forget. I came in on a Saturday, and I'm trying to draw this out. I'm at the whiteboard, and I got this crazy picture on the wall, and I'm like, this is what I think we need to do different. Right? We've been spending too much time going through the motions and just tracking the sales, but we're not paying enough attention tracking some of the leading indicators. And so I put this whole system of trying to create some transparency around leading indicator activities on the sales side and having our teams start to report in that way. And I said to our COO and our CFO, they were in the office that day, and I said, you guys got to tell me what you think. If you buy in and you say you'll support me, I will make this happen. But if and I don't want to go down this path and have you guys say, no, this is not a great idea. So then I'm out. And they looked at it and they asked some questions and they looked at each other and shrugged their shoulders and said, sounds good, go for it. So we called a big meeting the next day or next week, and we got everybody in. It was cliche, really. I remember going through and explaining what we were doing, why it wasn't working, what I think we needed to do, and went around the room and said, do you hear it? Do you understand it? Are you committed to it? And we made everybody say, yeah. And I think it was a lot of head nodding. I don't know that they really understood and bought into it at the moment, because the first couple of months of trying to go through that reporting mechanism was absolutely painful. Nails on a chalkboard. It was change. It was accountability. It was, it's just different. Nobody really wanted to do it. I didn't even want to do it. But I planted my flag and I said, well, that's what we got to do. Well, we could start doing this. And we went another, I think, 4 or 5 months before that first sale. So it was a total of 9 months without a sale. And to be like going through and doing the hard thing with these meetings every single month and still not having any results. They talk about the flywheel effect. That's what this was. It was having total faith in that flywheel. And I've never been more terrified in my entire life. And then later that year, I think it was April of 2016, we made a big sale and then a whole bunch more. And by the end of that year, in the last 8 months, we had already met our sales goal. And the next year, we far surpassed it. And we fixed our process. And in the end, they were right to trust me. But I'll tell you, I didn't even believe it for almost the first year. That was a very memorable occasion. You couldn't pay me enough to relive that year.
Man, there is just so much value in everything that you just said. There's so many different roads that we could go down. I heard something like faith that your decisions were the right ones, even though you weren't seeing the results, and your team having faith in you. Also, the thing that I really love is you made the shift from this outcome activity, this outcome focus, to the process focus. And I think that's where so many people really make a mistake. We're so consumed with the outcome that we want, the dream or the car, the house or the title or whatever it is. And so we skip over those little things that are mundane and monotonous that really need to be done to get us there. So there's so much tremendous value in that lesson and that story. So thanks for sharing that. What, if you could just give one, what would be the main process goal quickly in that meeting or that year that you had? What's the one thing that they needed to do to really move the needle forward?
Again, I think it was going back and creating transparency around leading indicator activities. And so what that meant for us is how often are the market segment teams meeting? How many people are showing up? How engaged are they? What's the opportunity funnel look like? Are they old opportunities? Are they new opportunities? What are we doing for thought leadership? How many touch points did we have with each client before the RFP came out? Those are the types of things that needed to be tracked and measured and create some accountability around. Otherwise, we're saying, oh, we're tracking this job, we're going to win it. Yeah, I think we got a pretty good shot. And then we count the sale or we miss the sale. It was way too laid back. And so that was the biggest difference for us.
It's all in those details. I love it. So talk to me and just tell the listeners, interestingly, you're in this construction industry. So what does mental toughness look like in that industry? Not just on the job site, but even in the strategic environment of the boardroom.
I'll start with the job sites. One of the mental toughness is two things, and they're related. And I said before, when you go into a job, you've already got an execution plan put together, theoretically based on all the prior commitments that you thought you got from your suppliers. Here's the plan, right? And then when you step onto that job, the plan starts to come apart. Everything changes. And so having the fortitude to stick to that plan and not take every excuse as, okay, we'll just move the date back. So that stick-to-itiveness, that's one piece of mental toughness. The other thing is some of those excuses aren't really avoidable, and I don't know that they're excuses. It's just a reality. It's an unforeseen condition. It can really weigh on you when you have invested lots of time and effort and energy into a plan, and then the second weekend you got to go back and replan around this thing that you didn't anticipate happening. And so that kind of ability to like roll with the punches a little bit and find a way to not let that impact the outcome, the end date, the overall budget. Okay, I know this happened, but how are we going to save money? How are we going to save time? How are we going to make it a better product in the end and reinvest that energy? That's what I think is the case on projects. In the boardroom, like what I loved about being in the field, there was a beginning, a middle, and an end to every project. There's a clear and compelling goal. And that you got to celebrate that. Once you get into more of the office realm, you're budgeting and you're planning and annual calendar years. Projects are starting and finishing all the time. I'm just not involved in the details. So what I found is it was really difficult to like get excited about something because I didn't have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It was just always changing. It was just constant churn of a new problem, and the power of taking the time, kind of sitting back and setting some specific goals and your own accomplishments there. Your internal reward system, mine, needed to shift.
How do you mentioned the weight of some of those decisions. How do you personally, if we can go inside Dennis's mind, how do you personally handle the weight of some of those decisions when there's really no clear cut outcome? There only seems to be those trade offs. Is there something that you tend to lean on or do just to get yourself back to the right headspace in order to become clear on what needs to be done next?
So sometimes I'm better at it than others. I'll say that.
Aren't we all?
One of the things that I've learned is not every decision is as urgent as I once thought. I don't need to drag my feet. I don't intend to postpone or kick the can down the road. But oftentimes there's a lot of power and wisdom in sleeping on it. So you hear about the situation, you consider your options. I like to bounce it off some people, not people that are just going to nod their head, but people that are going to challenge. So a lot of times what I'll say is, here's what their options are. Right now I'm leaning in this direction. What do you think? What do you think? What do you think? And get some debate. I learn a lot in that process. Sometimes it changes my mind. Oftentimes the points that are being brought up don't necessarily change my mind, but it still adds value in the way we go about implementing that decision. Because there are some things that I hadn't really considered. That's how I do it. In terms of how do I keep my headspace clear, that's where getting out of the environment a little bit, going home, going for a run or doing a good workout, sitting quietly. Now, I don't necessarily do an awful lot of meditation, but just kind of sitting in quiet space and just letting my thoughts wander. That helps me quite a bit, clear my mind. So changing my physical environment is really helpful. Making sure I get lots of sleep. Exercise and sleep are very closely related. And when I'm most stressed is when I'm most tired. And when I'm most tired is when that's when I want to work out the least. But every time I've fallen down, that's a bad spot to be. So got to force myself to go out and physical exertion. I always sleep a lot better that way.
Yeah, no, we're aligned in some of those things that we do to handle all that stress. And the physical stuff I think is easier, but you mentioned just sitting quietly. I think that's becoming increasingly difficult to do for so many people. Even when I try and do that, my mind is saying, check that email or grab your phone or those. It's just fascinating that we're at a point where it's so hard to just sit and do absolutely nothing for even a minute or two. So that's one of the things that I'm working on because I think you're right. It really does help. And I think you can get some clarity, some thoughts come into your mind that maybe aren't allowed to be in that space when you've got so many distractions. So I love those tips. So let's talk about what Granger actually builds. There are so many complex, amazing, inspiring spaces that Granger has been a part of constructing. And it's just fascinating to take a look at them and think about everything that's gone into them. But Granger as a company is also looking to build a great culture and great people and trust within the organization. So I'm just curious from your perspective, is there one of those two things that's actually harder to build?
They're both challenging. Constructing the buildings, you can see it. It's a lot more visible. You can verify it along the way. I can get an inspection done. I can take measurements, and I know the progress that I'm making. The hard part about building culture is it's not near as tangible. Do I have any proof? No, there's no way to prove. Culture is a lot about building trust and credibility with people. How do you know? You can't see trust. You can see behaviors. You can ask people, but it's much harder to see progress. You really can't measure it. We've tried. We continue to try. You can't afford not to try to measure it, but it is a lot harder to see. So I can tell you, to my time now is spent on building that environment or that culture. Um, and unfortunately, I don't get to spend near as much time on the building details until I go home, because that's my passion. That's what got me into this, right? A lot of my free time is spent. I like to get my hands dirty still and get the satisfaction of seeing something come together.
Sounds like you're getting the best of both worlds. Take it home and, like you said, roll up your sleeves and get out the hammer and nails.
Yeah.
Has there been a project, because you guys have done so many of them, has there been a project, whether it was big or small, whether it won awards or not, that really has taught you the most about yourself, where you learned the most about yourself through the process?
I'm going to say there's probably a string of maybe 4 projects that kind of the same trend happened. And it definitely became when you talk about, like, that ended up becoming my persona. And it wasn't that I was coming up with great ideas, because I'm not smart enough to come up with great ideas. But when you get into a project, there's so many things to do. Everything is time sensitive. And I got to do this, I got to do that. And so it's hard to take the time to slow things down and consider alternatives. There's always somebody there saying, hey, what about this? Hey, what about that? And a lot of times it's easy to dismiss them and just, I got too many things to worry about. I got a schedule to build. I can't be worried about doing that. But I took the time to take an extra phone call. Somebody said, hey, have you considered this? And I'd listened enough. And I said, you know what? Actually, it's a really good idea. Like, we could save tons of time, tons of money, make it a better product. So taking the time to find that win-win solution. And almost never was it my idea originally, but to recognize the brilliance of somebody else's idea and slow things down and say, we can't afford to move past that opportunity, because 2 months from now, when I think I have more time, it'll be too late. We will not be able to take that cost savings or change the product or revise the design. And so again, 4 projects in a row is like creating this win-win solution where we shave time, we save money, everybody won. And I like that was my joy. I took great pride in every job now, trying to find that next win-win solution.
So good. Such a great approach. And I think, again, listening is an underrated skill that not many people think that can contribute to a big project or a big success. And I love that you're slowing the game down, so to speak, and listening to your teammates as well, because I think there's so much value in that. And it sounds like you're extremely self-aware as well, because a lot of people wouldn't even realize that they might be quickly dismissing somebody that might have an important opinion. All good stuff. I wanted to ask too, as well, you're in the leadership position and you've been in the leadership position with the company for quite a while. So how has your view of leadership evolved over the span of the time that you've been in that role? And what's different about it now as you see it from what it was in your early days?
I think my answer to that is, I don't know that I had a great understanding of leadership when I was younger. I had this, you watch television, and leadership lots of times on television is about this authoritative, directive, super bold, loud, like that. This is what we're going to do, marching orders. And it was never really my style. And I saw it younger in my career. I thought, I'm going to be a contributor in my own way, and I could always grow into that. But I wouldn't have said I was a strong in the leadership area. And I'll never forget, I was probably 10 or 15 years, 10 years maybe into my career. We do these Monday morning, we call them a jam session, but it's just, you gather everybody before you start your work week, and We go through some coordination, what's going on this week. We share some learnings, and then we do a prayer and say, let's move on with our week. Our CFO is in there, and he says, I just wanted my shared learning today is I want to talk about leadership. And I'm like, move to the edge of my chair. I'm like, listen to me. I want to learn more about leadership. And he starts talking about what leadership is, and I'm listening. And he's talking about me. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I never really saw myself in that way. And he did. And he called it out. And I thought, wow, it changed my perception of what leadership is. And it's a lot more about seeing the vision, being able to communicate that vision, a little bit of consensus building towards that vision, and then putting good systems in place to help people thrive in that environment. And none of that, I would not, if as a younger person, my definition of leadership was different.
I've heard many great people that I've talked to about leadership and asked that question too. Basically it's some version of leadership is helping other people get what they want. So I'm just curious, in addition to what you just said, are there two or three soft skills or other ways that you've found that have been very effective in terms of getting people to actually buy into the vision and then move forward rather than just follow that vision that somebody else has dictated because they're the ones that sign the paychecks?
First is authenticity. The other thing is this concept, there's a power of authority and there's a power of influence. And if you have to rely on power of authority, you're probably doing it wrong. Not to say that sometimes they go hand in hand, but oftentimes you shouldn't have to force somebody to do something. You're trying to compel them to do something. So back in business school, a lot of the work was group work. And there is no formal authority in a school group, right? You have to work together to do a project, and nobody's the boss, and you can't force anything. So your success is based on how you can influence the outcome. And it was a powerful lesson that I'll never forget.
Yeah, no, that's amazing the lessons that we can learn years later from those group projects in school that we dreaded and didn't want to participate in.
That's right.
So just one more question. I know you're busy and I really appreciate you coming on, but with all these major awards that Granger has won for all their tremendous work and the things that they have constructed, there's a force or an initiative within the company to also have a major impact in the community and the communities that you serve. So how do you define success beyond just the metrics and the numbers and the actual physical spaces that you're building?
Motivations are not just about profit. We're motivated in impact, right? Beyond just making a few dollars, what impact are we making at the community level and at the individual level? We track our kind of corporate performance. Safety is number one. If our people are safe, we're feeling pretty good about that. Our brand is the perception within the marketplace, and sometimes that's our customers, sometimes that's our trade partners, sometimes it's just community members around us. And if that brand perception is strong, we feel great about it. There's obviously a financial component, and the last piece is employees. So if we got happy customers, happy employees, our financials are looking good, and people are safe, we're in a great spot. So if you distill everything we do down to those four metrics, that's what we consider to be success.
Dennis, I want to thank you for being on the show. And it sounds like you and Granger are winning at a very high level. So thank you so much for that insight. And how can people follow along on your personal journey? Where can they connect with you and then also keep tabs on what Granger's building and doing in the future?
LinkedIn, I'm not much of a social media person other than LinkedIn. I don't do any Facebook or anything, but I know we have a company Facebook account, company LinkedIn account. I think we're on Instagram company wide. But yeah, LinkedIn would be a great way to reach out and get connected.
Awesome, Dennis. Best of luck to you in the future projects and the current projects. And thanks again for being on the show. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, Bill.